Hi everyone, it's New Jersey Garden, and I thought today I would do a garden tour. It's May 31st, and a lot of my flowers are July and August and September blooming flowers, but we'll still do the tour and I'll point out the different plants. This is a lilac bush, a sensation lilac, and this spring I noticed that the 4 central branches all died, so I cut that out, and it does look a little funny. It's by our deck here, and I think we're going to end up moving it just because it just looks a little strange having the inside so bare. Over here I have a rose bush. It's a knockout rose, and I've been spraying it with insecticidal soap because there is a rose slug that gets that eats the leaves, and I do have a lot of holes in the leaves, so I've been spraying it with insecticidal soap. I have a lot of lilies. This is I have 2 types of lilies. I have actually several types of lilies, but this is a daylily right here. These are Asiatic lilies. These are more daylilies. They'll be blooming soon. And then behind the daylilies, I planted a lot of zinnia, as well as some Canterbury bells, which will bloom next year. Canterbury bells are a biennial. Over on this side of the walkway, I planted some more zinnias recently, and there's Sweet William growing in the front of the bed, and I have some lilies in this bed as well. And I planted some morning glories, which will climb up this little trellis here. 2 types of morning glories are growing here. And the Sweet William is all in the front, and that's also a biennial, so that will bloom next year. I planted some alyssum in this bed, and alyssum grows really fast. It's an annual. It has beautiful white flowers. It's a very billowy plant. And here's another lily. This one's a very large lily that I may be dividing. Over on this side of our front step, I planted some more zinnias in the back this morning, and there's a row of lilies here, and I bought this at the garden center. It needs a little more shade than it's been getting. It's a New Guinea impatiens. And back here there's some juniper bushes, and there's a perennial verbena called Verbena rigida, and that color purple looks really nice with the bluish green color of the juniper. It does grow by runners, underground runners, so I have to keep an eye on it. And there's some more alyssum planted in this bed. Over here on this side of our house, I enlarged the garden bed so that I could accommodate pumpkins. I'm going to grow just a couple pumpkins down this side bed here. I couldn't fit them in my vegetable garden, so I'm just going to grow them right here. And then another row of lilies. These are Stelladoro lilies. This is our garage. And then over here, this is probably my favorite garden bed. These beautiful flowers are not in bloom yet, but they're Maltese cross, and they don't spread at all, and I'm actually surprised. This year I lost a couple clumps of these flowers, so next year I'll be growing more Maltese cross. I grow a lot of my flowers from seed. I would say about 70% of the garden is grown from seed. So these are easy to grow, and I can't wait to show you those. I have some yarrow in here, and then I have some poppies that just started to bloom. This is a Princess Victoria Louise. It's a salmon color with black in the center. Down here, this is Lady's Mantle, just starting to bloom. I have some catmint down there. This catmint plant is just starting to bloom. It has tiny blue flowers. It really attracts bumblebees. There's a lily. I planted some zinnias in here. I have a lot of bees flying around. As you can see, these little holes in the ground, those are from ground nesting bees. And I did a video on this a couple days ago. These bees are not aggressive, but they are definitely making a lot of holes in the garden bed. And I was weeding yesterday and they didn't bother me at all. They're not aggressive bees. Just seeing a lot more of them this year than in years past. Here's another poppy. Now this is an oriental poppy, but this one's red and it's kind of like a reddish orange. There's lavender back there, and I have 4 lavender seedlings growing because this lavender, as you can see, has some bare spots in the center. That can happen to lavender. It happened to my other lavender plant that eventually died on me, so that's why I'm planting some new lavender this year. That will bloom in a few weeks. And then down here we just had this blooming. It was a yellow perennial, basket of gold alyssum. And then down here, this is a ground cover. It's an herb called soapwart. It doesn't have any scent. It's really lovely. There's some more poppies. These are the Princess Victoria Louise. I have a lot of daisies in this bed, and for some reason this year the daisies are really short. I mean, they're gonna bloom soon and they're only a few inches off the ground. They're normally a couple feet high by now, and the only thing I can think of is we planted a large amount of mulch, several inches of mulch, and that may have affected them. I can't think of why they're so short this year. Here's some more soapwort. It likes to dangle off this little wall here. There's another poppy, red poppy. I'm going to have a lot of poppies blooming in the next few days. There's more lady's mantle. Then I have this really nice Casablanca oriental lily. It's beautiful white fragrant flowers that will be blooming in a few weeks. There's more catmint with some soapwort and more poppies. And then once they bloom, they have this really interesting seed heads that form. Some more, it looks like oriental lilies found themselves over here along with some yarrow. Over there is a catmint. And then this plant is a brown-eyed Susan. I have several of these plants. Now this garden bed, like I said, it had a lot more daisies, and it's just looking really bare this summer. I think the last couple of years I've just lost some perennials due to cold winters and just dying off. So I'm going to be adding more plants in the next couple of years into this bed. This plant over here is a crepe myrtle, and sometimes I only get growth at the bottom of the plant that will grow, and other years I have the stems leafing out. So it looks like some of the stems are leafing out and there's a lot of growth at the bottom. Usually crepe myrtles grow in other zones. I'm in zone 6A, and I think this is a Zoomy or Zuni variety, which apparently can handle up to zone 6, but it struggles a little bit. It's very nice. It has beautiful blooms in September. Then I have a spiky plant called Liatris. I have some more lilies. The liatris is has a purple flower. It's like a tall, spiky plant, perennial. And it will grow the first year you plant it. I planted these liatris from bulbs. There's a little lilac shrub. And there's more brown-eyed Susans in this bed. I also have a cone flower over here. Now it took me a couple tries to grow coneflower from seed. I'm not sure why I had so much trouble, but they're really beautiful. And then over here I have, what's great is I have some peonies this year that just popped up from seeds that I didn't even plant. This is one of them. It's been here for about 4 years. It hasn't bloomed yet. It will probably bloom next year. Peonies take a really long time to bloom for the first time. And if you move a peony, it sometimes delays the bloom as well. They like to stay put. So I moved this little seedling that I found in another area where I have peonies into this bed. There's more liatris. Then we have this tree that we're not sure what to do with. It just popped up in the garden a couple years ago and it's grown really big. I'm not sure if it's a cedar. I'm not sure if we're going to keep it. We just hang our Christmas lights on it. But I'm not sure I like it in this part of the yard. And there's some more yarrow with liatris and some daylilies. Now this year I planted a lot of blanket flower seedlings. I had a lot of blanket flower in the garden before, and I love blanket flower because it's drought tolerant and it's deer resistant, and it just blends well with a lot of other flowers. But over the last couple years I had a disease that overtook them, and so this year I've planted about 10 blanket flower seedlings, and this is one of them. So I'll have a lot more blanket flower probably in July when they've matured. And then over here we have a clematis by our mailbox. I wish I knew what the variety was. It's just starting to bloom now. I'll show this when it's in full bloom. It's really beautiful. Sometimes I get 2 series of blooms out of it. I just moved some soapwort down by the mailbox. I used to have so much soapwort down here and it disappeared, so I just transplanted some back over here. I think adding all that mulch it seems to have affected the garden a little bit. It's just not as dense as it was, so I have a lot of bare spots I need to fill. But I do enjoy growing flowers from seed, so I'll just be ordering a lot more seeds next year. Here's some more liatris. And then I planted a little bit of that verbena that I talked about earlier in this garden bed. And then here are a bunch of my peonies, not all of them, but there's 8 peony plants here. And I'll do a peony tour when they're all in bloom. Then I have the shady area where I'm not sure what to plant here, but I get a lot of weeds here, and I thought about planting hostas, but we have a lot of deer, and I want to plant something that's deer resistant. I'm not sure I want to plant a ground cover or just shade-loving plants, but this area is really shady and there's nothing here. It's under a really nice tree. This is a dogwood. It's a red dogwood. Over here I have a gladiolus, and in this zone you're supposed to dig up your gladiolus bulbs every fall and store them for the winter, and I just never do that. So some years I get gladiolus and some years I don't, but this gladiolus was planted about 4 years ago. I think it's a yellow gladiolus. Here's some more coneflower. I might be dividing that. And then here are all the black-eyed Susans that I planted about a month ago. I grew these from seed. They're growing a little slowly, but they'll be blooming hopefully in August. And then I have a little bit of perennial phlox growing here. Now I'm just going to walk around the other side of the garden. This is another one of those trees that found itself here. We have to figure out what to do with it. I'm so excited for the peonies. I used to have lavender in this bed and it died on me, so I'm excited for the new lavender seedlings that I'm going to be planting. So as you can see, I have a lot of bare space in the garden, so I have a lot of places for new plants. Here's a close-up of the catmint. This lavender bush got really big. So now I'm going to go to a couple other parts of the garden. This garden bed is under our deck, and there are several peony bushes in here, and one of them started to bloom. I really like this variety because even though it doesn't have a scent, it stays upright. There's a little perennial phlox that's still blooming. And there's another Princess Victoria Louise poppy. And in this garden bed I planted a bunch of viola called Johnny Jump Ups, and they're finally blooming. I'll try to get in there so you can see. I have some in the shade and some in the sun. They just started blooming. It took them about 90 days. I planted them from seed back in February. So I'm hoping I hope they spread and I have a lot more next year. And there's also some Canterbury bells that I planted here from seed, and as I mentioned before, those will bloom next year because they are biennials, and I put them here because it's a windy day today. You can see everything blowing around, but this area is pretty protected from the wind, and I think Canterbury bells tend to flop over, so I wanted them in a protected area. So I'll be sure to show those peonies when they're in bloom. Over here I have a bunch of seedlings growing. I have some alyssum, some lavender seedlings, and some cornflower seedlings. And I had planted some cornflower in one of the garden beds a couple weeks ago, and it just only a few popped up, and then they seem to have gotten nibbled on by something. So I'm excited to transfer these cornflowers into the garden when they're ready. And then over here on this part of the deck, I do have a tomato plant growing, and it started out when I was planting seeds in the basement. This tomato plant popped up, and it must have been mixed in with some other flower seeds because I definitely didn't intend to plant a tomato plant. But I'm excited because I like tomatoes. And these are some flowers I planted from seed. They're pansies, just blowing really a lot in the wind. Here are some petunias I got at the garden center. I have grown petunias from seed before. This is lobelia that I grew from seed, not blooming yet. Here's some more petunia. I have a squash growing in this pot. It's probably going to be moved. I think the pot is too small for it. And then some lettuce growing in this pot. I have some bok choy that started flowering over here, so I'm just going to probably collect the seeds And I have some Swiss chard that is almost ready to plant into this vegetable planter. So I'll be planting that probably next week. I have some lettuce growing close together. I just wanted to see how it would grow if I planted all the seeds together like that. And then now we'll go down to the vegetable garden and see how those vegetables are doing. We expanded the vegetable garden this year. We have this fencing set up. We have a big deer problem, so we had to invest in some netting. Now over here on the right is some cucumber seedlings. So these are the cucumbers. I think I have 7. I have 2 different varieties and I have 7 of each. Started those from seed. In the back, there's some peas and they're growing really slowly. They were planted a really long time ago. I had some planted in early April. They got nibbled on by an animal, so we put up the fencing that you see. And then I planted more seeds. So what you see here is a combination of seeds planted in April and seeds planted in, I guess, early April and late April. And they're just growing really slowly. The bok choy that I planted from seed looks great, but it's starting to produce flowers, so I need to harvest this. When the warm weather comes, the bok choy will start to flower. I had this problem last year, and I could have probably planted this out a week or 2 earlier, but it was really, we had a very cool spring, so they really didn't start to grow until a couple weeks ago. So I may try to grow these in the fall next time. And then these 3 bok choy plants we purchased from a garden center, and they are getting nibbled on a little bit by probably a cabbage moth. Over here there's some rainbow chard. And then some more marigolds, and then there's some lettuce. There's a couple different varieties of lettuce. The lettuce grew really slowly this year. It's my first year growing lettuce, and I've been fertilizing them. They got a lot of rain. It just was very cold until recently, so I thought they would grow okay in the cooler temperatures, but the soil temperature just warmed up recently, so maybe they just needed warmer soil temperatures to grow. This is not a raised bed, it's just an in-ground bed, so they probably would have grown better in a raised bed. Then I planted 2 varieties of pole beans. And over here we have some strawberries that we purchased at a farm, and we've already harvested a few of them. So it looks like that's it for the garden tour. Next time I do a tour, I'll show you the peonies. I'll do a peony tour, and I'll have a lot more flowers blooming in the next couple of months to show you all. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for subscribing.